Hey everyone, this is Dr. Casey Johnson. Thank you so much for taking time to listen to the Unlock Wellness podcast. I know you're going to love today's episode with Danielle Petze. Danielle is doing some amazing work, so I'm excited to have her on to share a story with you guys. If you've been loving the Unlock Wellness podcast, be sure to jump onto iTunes, subscribe, and write a review. It really helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate all of the feedback and support. The Unlock Wellness podcast is now on patreon.com. Patreon is an amazing site that allows you to support your favorite podcasts. You can learn more by going to patreon.com/Dr. Casey Johnson. There are even fun incentives for supporting, like shirts and stickers, so be sure to check it out. Also, be sure to follow me on social media to keep up with the latest podcast episodes. The best way to connect with me is on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. My username across the board is at Dr. Casey Johnson. That's DrKaseyJohnson. You can also check out my website at drcaseyjohnson.com. It has all of the past podcast episodes and more information about each guest under the Listen tab. While you're on my site, also be sure to check out the Shop tab, where you can check out my first book of my Healthy Children's Book series and learn about the Unlock Wellness Project, which supplies a wellness bag to a child in need for each book purchased. Thank you again for listening. I hope this episode leaves you feeling inspired to start making positive changes to your health. Now it's time for today's episode. I hope you love my conversation with Danielle Petze. Welcome to the Unlock Wellness podcast. I'm Dr. Casey and excited for today's guest. I'm here with Danielle Petze, and Danielle's better known by Vegan Danielle. She is a chef, a podcaster, and she's just doing some amazing work. So I'm excited to have her on to share a story with you guys. So Danielle, thank you so much for taking time to come on. I'm excited to have you.
Casey, thank you so much. I know we've had a few scheduled things to try to figure out when was best for both of us. So I really appreciate you taking the time for me.
Yeah, no, I'm excited just to have you on and to share what you're doing. But, before we get into everything that you're doing with your amazing podcast, why don't we just start with your backstory, walk everybody through, first off, where you're from and also how your health has evolved over time. What did your health and wellness look like at a younger age?
A little background about me. So I grew up in the middle of nowhere, little tiny small town, same school, K through 8. All those kids went to the same high school, usually, unless they moved to another city. And so in one way, I was extremely sheltered as far as like being exposed to anything. And then in another way, there was like a surplus of drug production and definitely farming and hunting and, totally different than what I am today, the exact opposite, in fact. So I was that little sheltered girl that parents hid from everything. And then I just, I was sick of it. And when I was 17, I finished high school early and ended up moving out, and I didn't know what to do. And I wasn't very equipped to handle life, especially, not only being 17, but I was extremely emotionally immature. My parents, like I said, sheltered me a lot. So I made a lot of bad choices. And, some of that included substance abuse, alcohol abuse, of course, bad diet. I was eating fast food every day. And eventually that life got old. I was kind of forced to stop. And it ended up being a good thing. But right. I came down to San Diego about, 6 years ago now. And I came down here with the intention to get sober from the substances I was abusing. And along that process, a few years later, I discovered veganism and couldn't believe that I hadn't heard about it yet, with as much as I called myself an animal lover. So that's kind of the Cliff Notes, really short version. So I'm sure you have questions.
Right. Yeah. So, so you left, did you get your GED, or did you just graduate, just got all your classes done and just graduated early?
I just graduated early. I went on home studies. I think it was beginning of junior year or something. and they allowed us to finish up early. And originally the reason for me doing that was so that I could take on a full-time job, because my parents were divorced and my mom was never home and she was going back to college and working. And so it kind of became my responsibility to raise myself and my brother. And so I felt that it was necessary for me to get a job so that I could do that. And it's kind of a big task to take on at 17. So I made a lot of mistakes, but it worked.
Yeah. How old was your brother?
He's 3 years younger than me, so he was 14 at the time.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that definitely is a lot, especially, at 17, you don't really have anything figured out yet, and you're still like learning. And then as far as like, I know you were talking about whenever you did go off on your own, there was a lot of fast food, but honestly, you don't think about that stuff when you're that young for the most part, you're not wired to think like that. All you really care about is being with your friends, and you have fast metabolism. Like, that doesn't affect you at all at that point, right?
Right. And honestly, my parents, well, I'd say mostly my mom, because my dad moved out somewhere in my mid-teenage years, that my mom especially was such a health food, well, in quotations, junkie, that it was like she was obsessive. Like, there was like a minor, mental disorder there. And so it was very, we'd go to the mall to walk around and she'd wear 5-pound weights on her ankles and her wrists and march around like a soldier because she wanted to lose every little calorie she could. And I grew up with that being my norm. And so I also developed some eating disorders, and there was, a lot of unhealthy eating. So I think basically my point is, when I left home, I was just like, I'm going to eat all the things that my mom said I couldn't eat,
Did you feel like did you feel the effects of that food right away? Like, once you started eating it, were you like, man, there's a reason I'm not taking this. Like, I shouldn't be eating this all the time?
I don't think so.
Yeah. No.
I think I was so young and trying to be rebellious that it was more like, oh my God, this tastes so good. I've never had this before. But it didn't really dawn on me until a few years later, even before I turned vegan, that maybe I shouldn't be eating $6 burgers from Burger King.
Yeah. So you were talking about that you did find the vegan lifestyle. So first off, when did you even hear about it? Because you said that was completely a new concept to you. Was there were you watching a documentary, or was that like a friend that you had that was doing that?
Sort of, a little bit of both. So I turned vegan. I went vegan, however you say it. Let's see. I should have wrote this down before, because I always forget the date. This year, I'm still fairly new, actually. I just jumped into it very quickly. This year will be 3 years in November. So I've been the typical person, like, I love animals, like, to the extreme. Like, I would get depressed if I saw a squirrel get hit by a car, or like it was crazy, like way more than the average person that says they love animals. And I don't know. It was, I guess a lot of it probably came from my somewhat violent past with my parents. And so it was kind of like, I just couldn't understand why anybody would hurt anything, and especially animals. And at the same time, I wasn't vegan, and I never made that connection. And one time I was out at my friend's house in Arizona. This was probably, I don't know, 9-10 years ago. And she said she was vegan. And I said, what does that mean? And she said, well, it means I don't eat any animal products. And I was like, well, why would you do that? And she was like, well, because I care about animals. And I just remember it kind of going in one ear and out the other. And I was like, okay, cool. That was the first time I had ever even heard of the word. Then fast forward, I don't know, a couple more, 5-6 years, I guess, or no, I guess another 5 years from there. When I ended up going vegan, it was really random. I was walking through the kitchen one day and I looked down at my cat and I was like, man, like, I really love animals. Why am I eating them? And at that moment, there was no connection between that first friend that had talked to me about veganism. And like, I hadn't thought about that till after.
Right.
And I just remember, like, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to look this thing up. Like, and I remember I didn't even know the word vegan at the time. Like, I didn't remember it. And so I remember going on Google and typing in, like, how to not eat animals or something.
That's funny.
And yeah. And then what came up was Earthling. And I clicked on it and no idea what it was about other than not eating animals. Yeah.
So powerful though.
Yeah, it is. And I only got through about 5 minutes of it because I was so saddened and depressed and like, no way, I can't do this. Like, I can't believe this is real. So then I saw Vegucated, and then I think it was Forks Over Knives. But anyway, I ended up seeing enough of them where I was like, you know what? Not only is this about the animals, but it's also about health. And I had no idea about the environment. And, honestly, at the time, I probably wouldn't have cared anyway. It was just the animal side. And it really opened my eyes. And so I, in the beginning, I thought it was going to be really hard to cook vegan, and found the exact opposite to be true. So it just kind of has been a journey since then.
That's awesome. And isn't it crazy? Because I know, you talk to so many awesome people as well that just kind of have that epiphany moment. But just how amazing, obviously it's not what we both think is right, but the marketing side of that is so well done. The fact that we do have those blinders,
right,
and don't put two and two together, and it's it's in a way it's not our fault, because if you grow up in a society that's just the norm, it takes work to do the research to find that there are other ways. You know what I mean? It's just it blows my mind that so many people can't put those blinders down just because we've had years and years and years of programming that teach us the opposite.
Oh, I know. It's insane. Because, to this day, it's like I see it come out, and I'm sure you do a million times too. When I have a conversation with someone and they find out I'm vegan, and the first question is, 90% chance it's going to be, where do you get your protein? Right. And I just want to shake people sometimes, but then I realize I'm like, okay, I was there too. And there aren't commercials that are promoting plant protein. There's commercials saying that we need to eat animals or drink their milk,
Right. And it's funny. I think you actually posted it on Instagram the other day. I think I saw it, but it was funny because I had just seen that commercial. Did you post the dinosaur butter? So that cracks me up because if you're listening, if you ever seen this commercial, it's just funny because the commercial it's like for a plant-based butter commercial.
Country Cock, I think.
Yeah, but it's it's like a bigger company, right? Like a bigger dairy company.
Yeah.
And it's just like this kid's like, I want to be as big and strong as a dinosaur, so I need to eat meat. And then the mom's like, well, they eat plants, and then it kind of goes back, and it all comes back around it's for this plant-based butter. But it's like people know this, and it's just they're just not putting two and two together. But I think it is coming around to where it is becoming more normal. It's becoming more mainstream,
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And so I think that's really awesome. And so once you started watching the documentaries, you dove all in, you started cooking. Had you been somebody that was interested in cooking before that?
Oh yeah. I was really fortunate in that scenario. Well, to a way, it was also kind of a hindrance as well, because my grandpa was a chef. Now, he passed away when I was a kid, but I remember being really little cooking in the kitchen with him. And the hindrance part is that he's full-blown German, came over during World War II. And so, his style of cooking is sausage and obviously potatoes aren't bad, but it's usually fried potatoes and all heavy cream and blah, 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 typical German diet. So that's what I grew up learning how to cook. And my grandma made the most amazing cookies and pies, and it's a, whole pound of butter and all this stuff. And so, I guess in a way, thankfully, my mom was such an extremist with the health food stuff that it kind of offset, me falling into that kind of obesity trap. And I'm really grateful for that in a way. Like, I guess, both are considered an eating disorder, but it kind of offset it a little bit. And so I don't know. What was your original question? I can't remember. I started going off.
If you was, I forgot to for a second. If you had, if cooking had always come natural to you.
Oh, right. That's where I was going. So yeah, my grandpa was a chef, and then he passed away. And then I've always been that creative kid. I was a math major in school. I loved art, all this kind of stuff. So I was a big, like even as a small child, like, hey, I wonder what happens when we mix these things together and try to cook it, And, I'm not technically a certified chef. I haven't been through culinary school. However, I was trained by a top chef, Angelo Sosa, when I was working at a restaurant before my current job. And so I was on my way to go to culinary school, and then I ended up picking this job doing audio engineering, which is totally different, but I'm thankful for. And I just kind of, I don't know, I'm actually really grateful that that didn't end up happening, because I had turned vegan right before that, and I wasn't about to learn how to cook animals in school, and I don't think there's any vegan culinary schools out in this area. So it was kind of like a savior when I ended up getting into this job. But anyway, it's also given me access to some of the most amazing produce items. And I've kind of like, people talk about vegan cooking being really bland. I'm like, no, like most all your spices are vegan. Right. Almost everything that we're eating is vegan. It's all plants. And, we only eat a couple main land animals, a couple sea animals, and then dairy, right? So, and look at the millions of plants we have available. So it wasn't a hard transition for me at all, especially because of my love of cooking. But yeah.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And like, as far as, you were talking about how culinary school was that first thought in your mind, right? But so whenever you left high school, you're starting to work. Is that where you wanted to go? Was that the goal in mind, was to work your way and get to culinary school?
Not at all. I was a computer science major in when I first went to college in Santa Monica. I took a minor in journalism because I've always loved writing and true stories and nonfiction stuff. And I started that way. About that time is when the drug and alcohol situation got worse. And I ended up dropping out of school. I came to San Diego to kind of clean all of that up. And once I had been in San Diego for about 6 months, I ended up starting school again. But some of the computer science stuff that I had taken before was not only so long since I had taken it, but a lot changes in computers. Right. You wait a year and you got new technology. And I would have had to take almost all the classes over again. And so I was like, I don't necessarily want to go through all that again. I don't love it, but I was just good at it. And I actually switched my major to a math major, which was like, what? And it's funny because same with math, I don't love it, but I was good at it. And then I actually ended up getting the job that I have today, when I was in the middle of school, and I ended up leaving school, which I'm not recommending leaving school, but it's just my story. So, anyways, long story short, not related at all. I mean, I always admired my grandpa, but I just wanted to cook in my own kitchen, not professionally.
Right. Well, I mean, it's different now, obviously, because with social media and with these platforms, you don't have to do that. I mean, obviously you can learn everything you need to learn online
right.
For a lot of things. And the platform that you have to cook and share with the world, you can do that by using social media and reach more people than you ever would have been able to before.
Right. And be able to do things in the privacy of my own home and on my own time schedule. And yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So with the job that you have now, like you said that, you found this opportunity and you decided to, leave school to go do that. So how did that all fall into place? Because it's pretty cool.
Thanks. Yeah. So just to give you and your listeners a little bit of a background. So where I work is called Specialty Produce. We are San Diego's largest produce distributor. We are open to the public if you're in San Diego and want to check it out. But basically, we cater to something like 80% of San Diego restaurants. So we either deliver to them or they pick up. And it's essentially, it sounds like it's wholesale. But like I said, we are open to the public. We not only have fruits and vegetables, but we have grains. We have bulk items with the bins. We have some specialty items like truffle oil and things you're not going to find at, a chain grocery store. So the really crazy part about this is that inside of the store, we have a podcast studio, and that is called Specialty Produce Network. So I'm the full-time producer there, and it's also where my podcast is hosted. But along with mine, there's, I think, 14 other podcasters right now. So I produce and edit all of those. So yeah, it's a pretty cool job that I just kind of fell into. So how I got associated with the company was that I used to be a customer here many years ago. And I shouldn't say many, about maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And I started shopping here, and I would come in, and it's like 40 minutes from my home, so probably only come once a week or once every 2 weeks. And I started making things and taking pictures of them with my phone. And after doing this for, I don't know, maybe 6 months or something like that, one of the girls at the register said, "You know what? The owner likes that you've been tagging us on Instagram. Your pictures are getting really good. We can give you a discount basically as a recipe developer." Like, okay, because I was posting recipes. Yeah. And so basically I would tag them on Instagram, they would repost, and I would get a discount on produce. And I'm like, okay, this works for me.
Right.
So I started showing up more often, and I think I was doing that for about a year or so, a little bit more, I think. And after that, one day I was shopping in the store, and the owner came up to me and he was like, "We always see what you're doing. We like what you're doing. Would you like to work here full time?" And I'm like, and this was right when I had taken on the, on my way to be chef position. So I was like, okay, yeah, what are we talking about? And we sat down in the back and talked some numbers and time frame, and it worked for the both of us. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to culinary school. I'll start in 2 weeks. So
that's awesome.
It's kind of how it all happened. So I'm extremely grateful for it.
Right. I mean, because it just, it obviously happened at a perfect time and fell in line with, your values as they evolved too. But it also, Danielle, like combines everything that you had been working on and everything that you loved into one thing. You had been in the computer science field, obviously technology, and then like the creative journalist side of it, the cooking, and it kind of brings it all together, which is really cool.
Yeah, I agree. And the benefits here are insane. Like we actually, I'm not going to obviously go through them all, but one of them, today we just had some representatives come by from 24-Hour Fitness, and we're basically getting almost free memberships. Like it's only like $7 a month, and we get the full membership. And I'm like, what kind of company does that? Here's some free produce and membership to like the most popular gym, at least out here,
Yeah, no, I mean, that's amazing. So with your podcast, did you start it right away because you had the studio time, or was that after you started working with different podcasts and was like, hey, I'm going to start my own too?
No. So that's a weird story too. So I was actually, when I was a customer here, before I started working here, about 6 months before I started working here, one of the owners came up to me and said, "Hey, we're building this podcast booth. You want to do a podcast? You do a vegan podcast." And I was like, no, like I'm not comfortable speaking. I have no idea what I would say or who I would bring on. And, of course I didn't even listen to any podcast. I didn't even know what a podcast was. I just jumped in and was like, okay, so you want to hear some terrible podcasts? Go to the first 10 of mine.
Listen, I'm
bad.
Sure any podcaster can probably say that same thing. It's a learning curve, and you have to learn a lot of just how to speak, what not to do, and it's obviously that the learning never stops, right? You're always listening and changing.
Oh my gosh,
getting better.
Yeah, it's interesting because I catch the filler words that I do a lot of.
The filler words in my first episode are so bad, and there's even until really the last few months I've had to cut down on the likes. So I'm sorry guys if you've been listening and I've said like a million times. I'm working on it.
I say so hard, a lot.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a learning curve, but I mean, I think if you are continuously getting better and your heart's in the right place and you're really just trying to help people, which, we both are, it's like, you can't, only positive things will happen. So, I mean, that's awesome. So you started the podcast and then, they were trying to talk you into doing the podcast. So where did it kind of go from there?
I said yes because I liked the company and I was like, all right, I guess we'll figure this out. And so started recording. And the funny thing is when they had asked me, the studio had just been started. Like nobody really quite knew what they were doing. It was just an extra room we had in the warehouse. The owner had a audio guy that kind of set everything up. And there wasn't a designated producer. It just kind of, retail employees would come in and do stuff. Like, it was definitely the best that they could have done with their scenario. That improved over the next few months. And then, so it was in June when I got hired, and they ended up saying, okay, well, that was my first day, was June 1st. And so it was like, okay, here, this is pretty much yours. Like, just fix all this stuff, do this, whatever. And I'm like, oh man, okay, super excited. And then when I started digging deeper and realizing like how many things, I don't even want to say went wrong, because they're all learning points, it's a bunch of stuff that I learned without having to make the mistake.
Right.
So, I was kind of handed this pile of stuff, and it was like, here, figure it out. Okay, cool. Good thing is I know how to troubleshoot a lot of audio stuff now. So yeah, that's where I am now.
That's cool. So right now in the studio, you have your podcast, and then there's also other podcasts, right? So you kind of manage all of that. You, like you were saying, you edit, produce those podcasts as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the other ones, we have a couple that are specially produce brands. So that basically means that they are employees of the company that have a podcast. So kind of like mine, just not necessarily vegan. And then we have a couple others that we rent the studio to that are not employees here, that may or may not have anything to do with the food industry. So it's kind of a mixture of some things. We are leaning a little bit more towards the food industry now. I think we were kind of trying to experiment and see if we could be all over the map, but it's just kind of more beneficial to us and everyone in our community to stay on the food track. So it's, kind of where we're aiming towards.
That's cool. Yeah. And, for your podcast though, you've had a bunch of episodes as well, and you've talked to a lot of really awesome people. Have there been any like episodes that you've had that you've taken away just so much value just for yourself? Like, do you know what I mean? Like it's just really like taught you a lot, whether it's nutritionally or mindset related, or really anything.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I know,
and I'm sure you can say the same. Yeah. I don't want to say any names on the podcast, but there have been, I've had a couple doctors on the show that have, vegan doctors, obviously, that have definitely opened up my mind even deeper to how crazy the pharmaceutical slash healthcare industry is, as they call it, sick care. And aside from that, I've just had, I've had a couple stories. Actually, I'm doing a podcast later today, which you guys will figure out, obviously. If you're listening to this, it's with 3 little kids. And their mom sent me their stories, and they are very touching. Like, I've had a cancer survivor, and actually I'm one of those too. And so I've had a few different people that have had some crazy life stories that, like, it'll almost bring me to tears, that like this podcast isn't just about being vegan. Like, this is so much more, and that's, I feel like, way more beneficial for me than them to talk about.
Right. And because obviously for every time that either of us have guests on, we're learning stuff. Like, it's not only inspiring people that are listening, but us too. It's all, everything is just learning all the time, but I love it. And you were talking about the cancer scare for you. When was that?
It was almost exactly 2 years ago. Yeah. Or it is about almost exactly. So it's thyroid cancer. It was totally random how it happened. I was, so the semester before summer, so the spring semester in college, I ended up going back. This was the time. Oh yeah, I told you about the math major. So I was in school as a math major. I hadn't done all my general eds, and I went to health. I started taking health class, and the teacher had told us that, if you go get a physical at the doctor and just bring in a slip saying you went to the doctor, I'll give you extra credit. I'm like, oh, well, I haven't done a physical in a while. Might as well go.
Right.
So I go do a physical, and my doctor says, I feel something abnormal in your throat. And I was like, all right, whatever. Like, I've never really been really sick as an adult. And so I'm like, all right, well, I'll just go have it checked out. So he sends me to go get an ultrasound. They say they see something funny. Then I ended up getting, why am I drawing a blank right now? where they take a sample of
Like a biopsy?
biopsy. Thank you. Drawing a blank there. So they did a biopsy, and this was in my throat with thyroid. So they did a biopsy, which is really weird having a needle stuck in your throat, but and it came back positive for cancer. And so I, of course, was freaking out and thinking all these things like I'm way too young and what's going to happen and the money and, you know, all these different kind of things. So I started doing some research online, and at this point I had been vegan. God, I don't know. I shouldn't even say I was vegan by the time this happened. I don't remember exactly. So I already knew that plants were medicine and that, you know, eating meat was just going to make this scenario worse. And so I started doing research online, and it talked a lot about eating more raw, eating more alkaline, because cancer can't survive in that kind of environment. And so I went almost all the way raw. I started juicing all different kinds of greens I'd never even used before. And just basically while I was waiting for different results to come back and waiting for my surgery date. Thankfully, I didn't have to have chemo or radiation. They were able to cut out half of my thyroid because it was only affected. There was only like a tumor on one side. So now I get to go back every single year to go get checkups. But that's it. You know, I feel like I got really lucky. When people say they have cancer, you start counting days, you know?
Yeah. And that's crazy that you went just because it was an extra credit assignment. Like,
oh my gosh.
So lucky. I mean, man, it's crazy. That's amazing. And I mean, I think about, obviously it could have been a lot worse if you were still living how you were in the past, you know?
Yeah. And of course, all these things are running through my head. Like, I probably did this to myself. How long has it been here? Which, you know, may be the case. But I went back to that health teacher after I had the surgery and like showed him the scar, and I just like gave him a big hug and was just like, oh my God, like you don't understand what happened. And he was like, what? And I actually ended up speaking in front of his class the next semester and talking to them about my experience with the cancer and also going vegan. So it was kind of cool.
That's awesome. No, I love that. I mean, that's really amazing how things like that just like play out, because, and then obviously you don't know how many people you reach just from speaking in his class. You know, that changes how maybe he teaches things as well. What was the actual class that was?
It was literally health. So it was like health 101, you know, like the basic, like very, very
like
basic
a high school
class
health
that you needed.
Basically?
Kind of, yeah. It was like a little tiny section on why you should eat fruits and vegetables, and the rest of like the USDA food pyramid, you know?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. How has, because you did have half of your thyroid cut out, have you noticed any effects with that? Or do you feel just because the way you do take care of your health now, you're really it's easier to balance out what maybe is gone, you know what I mean?
You know, I have to get tested every year for my thyroid hormones just to be sure. So it's like TSH, T4, T3. Yeah. And it's funny because I actually just recently had them tested again. And so I haven't been on any hormone replacement therapy because the other side did take over. So I had, you know, a test right after the surgery. I had a test, I think 2 months down the line, and then every year thereafter. And my test results just came back, I think last week, for my thyroid, and it's actually functioning better today than it was last year for my checkup and from right after I had the cancer removed. So it was like, I mean, it's the best out of all the results. So I was kind of shocked. I'm sure it has something to do with being vegan, but I'm like, I'm supposed to be at a, you know, low as far as function goes, and it's fine.
Yeah, it's really amazing how smart the body is and how it can adapt when you give it the right fuel and when you do the right things for your body, just overall, just how it can overcome so much more than we give it credit for.
I know. And, you know, in a way, I feel like that's why a lot of people take so long to get healthy, though. You know, it's like, well, I'm not having any symptoms. I'm, you know, this is the way I've always been, blah, 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 blah. And, you know, you have these, you know, I think of guys in particular, because you think about athletes or something like that, and they, you know, functioning at peak performance, and they're, you know, early 30s, and they're playing football, and they got a 6-pack ab, and like you wouldn't think that there was anything wrong because physically they look amazing.
Right.
And then you go take them in for a blood panel and they might do cholesterol or, some of these different blood tests that can show after continuous meat eating or dairy eating that there's significant problems, and I'm sure you can attest to that even more. And it's just like, just because you look good on the outside doesn't mean your body's okay.
Absolutely. No, I know it's really hard. I think that's one of the biggest things that is the hardest to get people to understand. And at the same time, I get it. And I'm sure you do too, because we were both at that point at some point in our life, when you were 17 and taking down fast food, like it's your job, like you do the same, it's, it's just the same thing, same thing when I was younger, or like in college, like it didn't matter what I ate, so you don't think about those things, and you don't think it's going to affect you ever, basically, because you feel fine and you're not sick and you don't have cancer. Like the worst is probably people that, like you were saying, like that football type physique that obviously they look the part, or people that aren't overweight, because it's like, people will tell somebody that's super thin that they're so lucky for their metabolism, but they might be sometimes the most unlucky, because sometimes they find out things too late, so it's, it's hard. It's just understanding that it's not about how you feel, but it's how is your body function and healing.
Yeah, I know. And I mean, I found out so many things that I felt that I was having no symptoms of, like obviously the cancer being the biggest one, but even just getting back blood tests and realizing that like there were certain areas, with my red blood cells that were a little bit off. And, me and the holistic doctor ended up pinpointing what was going on, but it was nothing to do with my diet. It was nothing to do with activity or anything like that. And I would have never known that there was a problem until I saw the test results. So, I mean, a lot of this stuff can go a long time before you even notice anything, if ever. And I don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard to convince people.
It is. But I think, obviously the more that we can spread the word and just get that information out there to people, obviously it's going to get there. I see it happening, especially with social media, and like a lot of actors and people that have huge platforms are sharing it, which I think is really great, because it can get it to more and more people. And then obviously platforms like we've both created is going to just help even more. So, I mean, I really love what you're doing, and it's definitely making an impact. And, Danielle, who influences or inspires you? It doesn't have to be, it can be somebody in the health field, but not necessarily. But is there anybody that you really look up to personally that just helps you continue to develop as a person?
That's such a good question. I don't know if I could pinpoint one person. I'd say when I was younger, it was my grandma. Like, she was that solid rock that I was always able to look at when stuff was crazy. But now when it comes to my more mature life and veganism and outreach and things like that, like, I gotta say, honestly, my listeners and my guests, like, there's just been so many amazing people. Like, of course, I'll follow doctors and, listen to vegan doctors, of course, but listen to a lot of the things that they're posting and evidence-based stuff. But, when it comes to cooking, I'll sometimes follow. I mean, I follow a ton of vegan cooks, and I learn from, I don't know, those that are putting something out there that I'm interested in. So I don't know. I guess it would be kind of hard to pinpoint a specific person.
Yeah, no, same here. You get those, like, once you start following people that have the same mindsets on like social media, like those people really inspire you, because you can see how they live each day and like what they're eating. And like, that's played a huge impact on my own personal journey. I know it's, I 100% agree.
Yeah.
So, as far as the podcast and everything you're working on, like, do you have anything coming up in the future that you just want to put out there and share with people? Maybe something you're working on, or just continuing to put out a lot of podcasts and share everything that you're doing?
Oh man, I think you probably got it right there. I've had some ideas that I don't think I'm ready to share yet. Just some things that are kind of possibilities, but definitely in their baby stages. Because as happy as I am where I'm at, I definitely want to be able to have a little bit more of an impact, or expand, I guess. And so there's a couple of things that may happen, and hopefully, if they do, I'll definitely keep you updated. But yeah, honestly, I've just been putting one foot in front of the other and just kind of following doors that are open and try to, I don't know, be as open-minded as willing as possible.
No, I love that. No, I love that. I mean, I know you're going to do amazing things. And what is the best way for people to follow you on social media? Just keep up with everything that you do work on. And then obviously keep up with all of your podcasts that come out and check that out as well.
Thanks. Yeah. So, I mean, my website, which is vegandanielle.com, super simple, straightforward, has all of my social media links on there. In addition to links to my podcast, there's a little bit of like cooking type stuff on there, not recipes, but it's like kitchen terminology and some, not super extensive stuff. But my website's probably the best way. I always update that. So once again, vegandanielle.com or Instagram, which is vegan_Danielle. I don't really check my Facebook, so I don't recommend going on there to contact me, but it's the same name, Vegan Danielle SP on there.
All right, perfect. Yeah, I'll put all of that in the show notes. That way people can just go click and add, and then obviously check out your website as well. And Danielle.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And, Danielle, just closing question that I ask every guest. But if you just had one piece of advice for the audience, maybe it's something that's been your biggest takeaway through your journey so far. But if you only had one piece of advice to give, what would it be?
Ooh, be open-minded. I think that would be my biggest thing is, don't rely on everything you hear from the media or even your friends and family. Be open-minded, explore things, and make your own decisions. I guess that would be a better way to put it, is make your own decisions. Don't let the media influence you.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's perfect, Danielle. And just thank you so much for taking time to come on. I loved having you, and I'm just excited to promote the work that you're doing. And so guys, if you're listening, go check out her podcast, give her a follow on social media. And Danielle, just thank you so much for coming on.
No, thank you. And I'm so excited. You're going to be a guest on my show. I'm so excited to hear more about your stories. So you guys got to head over and listen to that once we do it too. But thank you, Casey.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you loved my conversation with Danielle. She's doing so much positive work, so be sure to give her a follow on social media to keep up with everything that she's been working on. You can find her social media links and podcast and website that we talked about in the episode in the show notes, but you can also find them on my website as well at drcaseyjohnson.com. That's drkaseyjohnson.com. Click on the Listen tab. Then from there, you'll be able to see all of the past guests that have come on the Unlock Wellness podcast, read a little bit about each guest, and be able to click on their social media links, websites, all of that. So all of Danielle's information can be found on my site as well. If you guys loved today's episode with Danielle, be sure to jump onto iTunes, subscribe, and write a review. It really helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate all of the feedback and support. Also, be sure to check out patreon.com/Dr. Casey Johnson to learn more about how you can support the Unlock Wellness podcast. Thank you guys so much again for tuning in to today's episode. I hope you loved it. I hope it inspires you. And most importantly, I hope you take action.